conveniently enough, I hit record. So we don't have much to talk about. This is actually pretty cool. We're going to dive right in. Episode last time around, 2 seasons back, and we're going to ask AI about it, is bridging the gap, how developers can thrive amidst differing methodologies. Now, one of the interesting things is I did not go back and look at all of these after we recorded them way back when and actually like look at the titles. So there's some of this stuff I'm like, wow, did we talk about that? We're going to find out what AI thinks here in just a few moments. Let's dive right in. Three. Well, hello and welcome back. We are continuing our season of building better developers, developreneur with AI. Yes, we're going back through a past season. We're taking those topics, throwing out the AI and see what it says. So far, it's actually been really interesting. It's been very much in line with a lot of the things we've talked about. And the 10 things that it suggests, we have never gotten through all 10 because we have comments on every one of them, because that's who we are. More specifically, I am Rob Broadhead, one of the founders of Developreneur, also the founder of RB Consulting, where we're that company that sits down beside you and says, let's look at what you've got as far as technology is concerned, see where you want to go with your business, and we're going to craft a special recipe and help you build a roadmap, maybe even help you implement it for your technology so you get a better return on investment through integration, simplification, automation, even innovation. We will find ways to take what you've got. My favorite latest one is take that junk drawer of technologies you've got and turn it into something that's actually useful so that you're not sitting there at the end of the year going, where did all of these licenses and all of this money go? And instead, you're counting all those bags of money that come in because now you have a smooth, slick process and you're leveraging technology instead of being, hemorrhaging technology even. Good thing, bad thing. Good thing was got to take a week off, sort of, about a week or two ago. Got to spend some time away from home, a little bit different, change of scenery and things like that. Had a couple of days that were partial days essentially and things like that. We're able to check out some of the areas around there and some, nice little walks and exercise and good things like that. Bad thing about that is somewhere along the way, picked up some sort of crud or something like that. So now I've got that deeper radio voice that hopefully I will not be coughing through this too far. That being said, the guy on the other end is now apparently on the other end of all of his allergy issues, but we'll see how that goes. Michael, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Meloche. I'm one of the co-founders of Building Better Developers, also known as Developreneur. I'm also the founder of a company called Envision QA, where we work with businesses and understand their problems and help them find a solution. We do that through essentially a QA mindset. Walk through the processes of your company through a user's perspective. We essentially do an assessment of everything within your technology stack and determine how you're using your software and if it's working for you. If it's not, we help you customize the solution that fits your needs, either help you find over-the-counter software or build you something custom to work with your systems and hopefully improve your performance and customer satisfaction. Good thing, bad thing. Well, good thing on my side, as Rob mentioned, I am over my allergies. I am past my part of the season, and part of that is due to the fact that we have had sunny weather for almost a week. A few rainy spots there, but lots of sun, so I can finally get over the crud that I have. Bad side of that, I am away from my house this week because my daughter is at Bonnaroo, which is a Woodstock kind of thing in Tennessee concert. So I get to dog sit for a week amongst all my other business tasks. So I get a multitask this week.
Always a fun thing. Never hurts to have a few pets, at least so I've heard. I had kids instead. Moving on. So the topic we're going to talk about last time around was titled Bridging the Gap, How Developers Can Thrive Amidst Differing Methodologies. So we throw that at AI, at ChatGPT, and of course, it is very impressed with us. It starts out with, that's a great topic, very relevant in today's multi-methodology hybrid tech teams. There's some things here where you can see where AI is like, as they say, over-egging the custard a little bit, throwing a couple extra big words out there to make it impressing. But let's go into their outline and key talking points. So set the stage. What are differing methodologies? Quick overview of common methodologies: Agile, Scrum, Waterfall, Kanban, DevOps, Safe. Explain why teams often end up mixing them: enterprise constraints, legacy systems, client demands, etc. Now, this is one that I think we really did start with like a very brief definition. We didn't go as broad as they said there, but it's basically you sort of want to set the table for something like this. This one, I don't think we have too much to talk about, so let's move along to the next point and see what they say. This is where the common struggles developers face. Context switching between styles, for example, Agile Sprint versus Waterfall Milestone Mindset. Misaligned expectations, definition of done or documentation depth. Communication challenges when processes are not uniform. Friction from leadership or other departments with different cadences. That's 4 or 5 episodes right there, I think. The first one, I'll just dive into the first one. Context switching between styles. We talk about switching your projects on a regular basis where you maybe have 2 or 3 projects at a time. They may be different technologies, different environments and things like that. And there is that mental cost of switching from thinking about, for example, JavaScript and putting semicolons at the end of your lines, or Python where you don't have any and you have to make sure you get your tabs right, or Java where you're worried about case sensitive versus maybe DOS where you're not, things like that. Okay, DOS, there's not a lot of people out there, but I'm going to throw that out there just because I can. It is, I think, more jarring to do it from a methodology point of view. This is something I don't think we've really talked about it from the higher level methodology point of view, but I'm going to throw this right at you as like the thought of it, because I'm sure you've been there as well, where we're working a project, maybe one customer it's Agile, the other one's Waterfall, maybe one's Kanban, and this is even amongst Agile. Maybe you've got a Scrum that's like every 2 weeks you do a sprint, another one you do every 3. Some of you do retrospective, some of you don't, things like that. So what are some of your thoughts on the context switching?
So there are pros and cons to this. Let me start with the pros. So one of the things that I enjoy about context switching is if you're working out multiple projects, especially in the same language and in the same kind of business class, you typically can run into burnout where it's like, oh, I'm working on this and I switch gears. I'm still working on kind of the same issue, same problem. One of the things I like about working on multiple projects in different contexts or different languages is it allows me to mentally shift from one mindset to another, lets me take a break from what I'm working on over here, lets me get over here and work on this. Now, the negative side to that with switching context is, like you said, kind of that mental shift. You have to make sure that you go from this language, you go to this language, you got to make sure you got the syntax right. If you're starting on a new project that you haven't worked on the language in a while, that uplift is going to be a little tedious at the beginning. Now, if you're going back and forth between languages that you've worked with constantly, it's less of a contextual shift, so to speak, because you're in it enough that you can go from this, you can go to this, go to this. It's kind of like being bilingual. If you can speak Spanish and English really well, you might be able to speak like French, but if you're not, if you took Spanish for 4 years in college and it's been 10 years, yeah, you might be able to understand it, but you're not going to be able to jump in and start speaking it real well right away. It's kind of the similar kind of context with programming language. It's still a language. So all I can say is make sure that if you are jumping projects and you're dealing with this contextual shift, make sure that you have the tools in place to do it, because if you don't, not having the right tools in your tool belt is going to be another kind of downside to multi-switching, because you're going to be like, oh, okay, I can use Visual Code. Well, Visual Code, if you go from like Python to Java, oh, what libraries do I need? What plugins do I need? You might be better off just downloading like Eclipse or IntelliJ to quickly jump into that language. So just some things to think about. Your thoughts?
The tools is really interesting because I actually like when I'm crossing languages, and this is not so much with a methodology side, but when I'm crossing languages, is a good point. Actually like to stay in like a Visual Studio Code or something like that, so I'm in the same the same general context. I sort of know where windows are and things like that, and quick keys and stuff like that. There is a benefit though of switching them so that there is, when you're looking at it, there is something visually different. So you're like, oh, I'm working on project X instead of project Y. Now I'll even do that in the same language sometimes. If I've got two projects of the same language, I may work one. Let's say they're both Java. I'll work one in Eclipse and another one I'll work in IntelliJ or something like that, or Visual Studio.
Now, interestingly enough, though, this week, well, we've been working on some things. You've broken your local environment because you're using the same environment and the same tool suites. So that's, to me, that's kind of a trade-off if you try to stay in like Visual Code, because if you do something for one project, you could potentially break yourself in another. Whereas if you have the two, you separate the instances, so to speak.
Well, this is not my environment. This is my operating system. This is an underlying database. This is where that's a whole different concept where maybe it is better. And I've thought about this a lot in the last week, that it maybe is better to just run through containers and stuff, like do your development there, have your environment up, spin it up, do what you need to, and go from there. Because sometimes you get operating system updates and everything breaks. I'm not going to complain about Brew and Mac, but I just did. It can cause you some issues, especially, and it can cause you issues when you're crossing languages, you're crossing databases and some other stuff. You'll get libraries that connect, that updates you don't want to. And it's not just Mac and Brew. I know Windows, that's part of why I left it. I had too many DLL hill situations in my life. Moving along though, this next one, misaligned expectations. For example, the definition of done. Oh my gosh, this is the quintessential discussion in every project somewhere along the way. If it's done right, no pun intended, you talk about it early on. Like, what does done mean? What does it look like? If it's not, then what's going to happen is somewhere along the way, there's going to be an argument slash discussion slash World War III beginning over what does done mean. And usually it is when you cross like business analysts versus project managers versus QA versus developers, because they don't always say the same thing. They don't always think the same thing. And then you have the user who doesn't always think the same way. And when you say something is done, that needs to be clarified. This is something that we've talked about in various cases over the years. One of them is definitely when you're dealing with a customer, know what done means and make sure you're clear what done means to them, because you don't want to be in a situation where you say it's done and they don't think it is yet, or the reverse when you say it's not done, but they think it is. So they're like, ship it, put it in front of everybody. And you're like, no, 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 no. That is not kosher. So even, especially with methodologies, because there's a very different way that we approach things if it's waterfall versus if it's agile. There is that agile is almost always that like that 80-20, Pareto principle kind of approach of like, we'll get there, we're mostly done, we can clean it up in the next sprint, things like that. Versus waterfall, it's like it has to be done, code freeze, and then it better be solid. You better have all your pieces, all your ducks in a row. Thoughts on that?
Boy, that's a can of worms. Because interestingly enough, so being having a lot of experience on the testing side of things and doing a lot of user acceptance testing, integration testing, unit testing. From a tester's perspective, the definition of done is different than if you're doing like unit testing, because unit testing, you're testing a function of code, you're testing something behind the scenes. But whereas when you're actually writing these tickets, you're creating features for the user. You're creating something within the application for people to use. And the definition of done isn't always visible to the user. Sometimes it could be as simple as, something is created behind the scenes, a job runs, something is created in the backend. But these things need to be defined in such a way that it can be tested, that you can essentially check off. It's a checklist of things to do. The best thing I can say, and I say this all the time with testing, is think of a recipe. All the stuff that goes into it is all your ingredients, that's all your code. What comes out of it is those steps to actually produce the food. So you have the requirements, which is kind of that, here's your overview of what it is that you're making. You're making chocolate chip cookies, so you should get cookies. Is your ingredients are essentially this is what needs to go into the code to build it. Chocolate chips, sugar, flour, and then the recipe or the steps to produce it is essentially your checklist. Okay, did this get mixed correctly? Did this go into the oven at the right time? Did it come out burnt or did it come out the right way? That's essentially, to me, the way you need to tackle definition done or within a ticket. What is it that you're doing? What is the output of what it is we're asking you to do? If that's not defined, as Rob mentions, it's going to get to the tester and they're going to be like, well, what did you do? And the worst part is if it's not defined and the developer does something off task or out of scope and it's not documented in the ticket, you have no idea testing. You're going to go test it and it could be something totally different than what the ticket says.
And your food example gives me another, I think of something similar. If you want to talk about what think about how argumentative it can be to figure out what done is for a feature. Sit around with a bunch of people from different parts of the country and ask them what done means as far as steak is concerned. And you will find not only very different answers, people that very much want it done a certain way. And that's where I think we get into it's almost religious issues arguments when we talk about it, from developers to testers to project managers to users and things like that, that we can really get caught up in the semantics of that, the syntax of it. And so we need to make sure sooner rather than later that we walk through what that is. And that's also so much tied to methodologies. And that is where you really have to think through it. You're going to have to shift your mind a little bit to say, okay, what do I need to get done to mark this ticket complete or move it on to whatever the next phase is. Let's go ahead and move on. I'd say there's a lot of good stuff in this one. So they get into mindset shift from methodology purist to adaptive professional. Encourage developers to value principles over process. For example, delivering value, team collaboration. Share real-world anecdotes where rigid adherence hurt collaboration. Promote being methodology bilingual, understanding how different systems work, even if you don't prefer them. These 3 bullet points right here, this is basically the Agile manifesto. Like principles over process. This goes back to something we brought up, I think, even in this specific episode, is it comes down to why. Why are you building this application? Why are you solving this problem? What is the solution that you're really trying to get to? Because yes, there is a lot, when you talk about a methodology, there's a lot of rules, for lack of a better term, rules or guidelines on how to get there. But the bottom line is you need to get there. It's just like, you can jump in a car and go from one end of a country to another, and there's a lot of different ways you can go. And some are going to be better than others and cost more or less and things like that. But the goal is to get to the other end of the country. It's not necessarily that, hey, we turn left here instead of right and things like that. And I think that is something that too often I've been in situations where people get caught up in the methodology side of stuff and are not thinking about, we have a goal that is not serving the methodology. It's actually serving our customer. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's really funny. The principles over practice, what are you building? Why are you building this? It's when you start out on a project or start out on the journey, you kind of have a end goal in mind. You kind of have an idea. But the problem is, as you go through the project, either customer expectations change, requirements could potentially change, and you might lose yourself in the weeds versus where you're going. You could get distracted. It's that constant example we throw out is, why is this button purple? Why are you spending hours on a color when the application isn't done? It's, you gotta ask yourself, is what I'm working on working towards the goal? Or am I just working? Basically, am I being busy to be busy? Am I staying on task? Am I working towards something? We run into that all the time, and that's one of the clearest things. It's almost like the multitask thing. It's like you can't really work on multiple tasks simultaneously. You can perceptually wise work on multiple things at the same time, but really you're stopping your focus on one thing to work on another, and then when you shift to that, you're stopping your focus on that. Now if you say you're multitasking and you shift from this to this and you're still thinking about this, then you're not giving this its full attention. So try to make sure that what you're working on is going towards that goal, what you're trying to build, and not getting sidetracked in the weeds on something that is important, but maybe not important now for the end goal.
Yeah, it's just like red tape anywhere it can be. Is it, you can get the process can be what you're serving as opposed to the customer and the end product. Moving along, because there's great points there, and I don't really have much to add. Practical skills developers should build. Communication, learn to ask the right questions in different frameworks. Great one. This next one, words is going to be a full stop right after this. Documentation agility, how to write just enough without overdoing it. Now, is this is probably one of the most valuable skills for a developer to have, is to figure out how to write enough, or actually developer, business analyst, project manager, scrum master, whoever's anybody that writes tickets, documentation, requirements, how to put the right amount in there so that you are covering the things that need to be covered and you're not wasting people's time with a bunch of extra stuff, which actually goes back to the original thing I was saying about AI, is where it was like it could have had a much shorter answer, but it put a lot of fluff in there because that's part of what it does. And honestly, if you look at a lot of blogs and stuff like that, there is a lot of fluff in those things as well. People are spending too much time trying to impress people with the more than four-letter words that they know and all these things, and write to a 12th grade level or whatever it happens to be, as opposed to just be concise, get the point across. Just like I haven't done. I just added a whole lot of fluff right there. It's better off to say, make your point, make it clear, and move on. It's that simple. Thoughts on that?
The thing I'll add to that is one of the biggest problems with documentation is the multi-sources where documentation lives. At the beginning of a project, it should live in one place, be it Dropbox, one folder, whatever the requirements gatherer is gathered, it should go in one place. As the project goes on, this is one thing I've kind of adopted over the years. Your code documenting your code needs to be the source of truth. If you're adding Java docs or any type of comment documentation in your project, it should essentially go from the requirements to the code. You should have some way of building that with your code at the end. So you essentially can always look at your code and know that this is the source of truth. If you try to jumble the two and maintain a secondary requirements document outside of your code, that's fine, but you have to be very rigid about it, because if you don't stay on track, your code could go one way and your documentation goes another. But if you keep the documentation in your code, then essentially as you make changes, you should be updating your documentation, and then everything's in sync.
And that is a perfect segue into a great way to help document your thoughts about this, is to send us an email at info@developaneur.com. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you sitting here and walking through these things with us. I highly recommend that you do a process, spend a little time with something like this. Take some thoughts, throw them out to one of the AI engines, preferably a couple different AI engines, and see what kind of stuff comes back. Because we are getting into a world where, yes, AI can help you be more efficient. It can help you get stuff done faster, but you also need to be able to recognize AI in some of its fingerprints and some of the things that it does well and the things it doesn't do very good, so that you're able to leverage it even better, and also maybe not get caught up by somebody that's AI generated something and you think it's good, and then you realize that no, it actually isn't. It's going to help you in vetting not only your own work, but that of others. This actually is not AI generated. I'm a real person. He's a real person, as far as I know. And our intelligence, it may not be that great, but we are definitely not artificial. That being said, I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you again for your time. Go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time. Bonus material. Let me start with this. I'm going to fly through. We only got through four. I'm going to go through the five real quick and then see where you want to throw something in there. Bridging techniques, translate across teams, how developers can become communication bridges, suggest hybrid practices, share frameworks like Spotify model or dual track Agile, stories from the field, interviewers share a story from a dev who's thrived in a hybrid method environment. That would be a really fun one to try. Highlight successes, failure due to inflexibility and methodology use. Actionable takeaways. Audit your team's methodology fit. Learn one new method every quarter. Shadow or interview someone on a different team about their process. Suggest one small bridging experience in your next sprint or cycle. So, where do you want to go with that for some bonus material?
So I'll take it this route. One of the things that I've find useful in a lot of bigger companies and corporations I work with, when you have a large team, especially when you're in like 2 week sprints or you're in long, drawn out projects, take the time to do maybe bi-weekly, do like a team collab, spend an hour together as a team, talk through problems, talk through ideas, brainstorm. Maybe throw out, hey, what do you guys think of the direction we're going? Does anyone have any new thoughts or ideas? You can kind of do like an open platform. With that, maybe do lunch and learns, like pick a topic and just get together as a team and talk through a new technology or a new feature or new architecture. And lastly, hackathons. Get your team together and just pick something that's kind of been on the back burner on your team and just sit down and spend like 2 to 3 days on it and just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks and what you can come up with as a solution.
I think with those, I like to go with it. I think the more you experience the different methodologies that you've done a project, you've done multiple projects with them, especially different size teams, different environments, things like that. It's going to help you figure out ways to find a best of breed out of those because there are pros and cons to every one of them. And there are ways to mix and match things a little bit. Is take some of the strengths of one and maybe adapt them into another. Agile in particular is built to be more like a guideline. It is not a series of rules. So you can make some changes to it. You can start with an agile approach and take some of the things that you liked about maybe waterfall or some of the things you like about just a Kanban or some of these other approaches that are out there. And so you can find maybe your a best fit for you. You can also find ways, I think, to better do certain methodologies because now you've seen how a problem was solved in some other one, and that may open your mind and let you think out of the box to maybe approach this process and approach it a little differently with the other methodology. As always, I think the more tools you have, the more arrows that you have in your quiver, the more tools you have in your toolbox, the more you can realize that you don't have just a hammer and everything is a nail. That there are a lot of different, we'll just use the word nuances to get through this problem solving, and that's going to be the ways that you find better, newer, sometimes groundbreaking ways to get these things done. So take advantage of that. I mean, yes, it can be a challenge, but also it can be a great way to grow because you'll be exposed to a lot more in a shorter period of time. That being said, we're going to wrap this one up. We're coming back. We're going to continue this. We're going to take the next episode's topic and we're going to throw it out to AI and see what it says. And it's going to say it's brilliant because it always says nice stuff to us. And if it doesn't, then we're going to watch that one really close because then obviously it's gone evil on us and watch out. Skynet is right behind it. As always, you shoot us an email, but you can also hit us up at Developreneur on X. We have a Facebook page. You can go to developreneur.com. We have got so much stuff out there. Whatever your topic is, whatever your language is, whatever environment is, I can just about guarantee we've got stuff out there that can help you, whether it's at a beginner level or some specific problems, common problems that are solved in those languages and those environments, including things that are business problems. We have spent a lot of time with some of our mentor classes. We talked about some of the business problems that are out there. We've had several past seasons of Developreneur podcasts where we've talked about things that were common business problems and challenges. And of course, the interviews, I always go back to those. Those are just a gold mine of information. We talked to a lot of excellent entrepreneurs and people that are very top of their field. And there's always some great advice that came out of it. So feel free to check that stuff out. As always, let us know if you have any questions. We would love to get your feedback. And we will wrap this one up and we will get back to you next time around. Go out there and have yourself a good one.